Welcome to Complete Car, and on this beautiful sunny day in Bavaria, we are here to drive this, the new BMW i5 Touring. Yes, not only an electric car, but our favourite kind of car, an estate. Who needs an SUV when you can get one of these? Now, obviously, it's very closely related to the i5 Saloon that we're already familiar with. Underneath, you get the same 83 kilowatt hour battery, and in this eDrive 40 model, with its rear drive single electric motor and 340 horsepower, you get a theoretical range of up to 560 kilometers. We'll be putting that to the test very seriously in just a little while. In fact, actually, you may notice that this car is a slightly different colour to some of the other cars that you'll be seeing on this video, but that's because this is a very particular car. Those other cars are staying here in Bavaria. This one, well, this one's coming home with me. This one is being driven from here, just outside Munich, to Dublin via the ferry at Cherbourg by me, leaving in a couple of hours' time. And we're going to really put its range and drivability and comfort to the test, but that's for later. Right now, what we need to do is go and check out the business end of this car, which unusually for a BMW isn't in the front. It's down the back, because this is, of course, the i5 Touring. We need to go and see what the boot is like. So BMW has been making 5 Series Tourings for 33 years now, since 1991, and the third generation 5 Series. It's sold more than 1 million of them, and here in Germany, this Touring is actually more popular than the Saloon, and frankly, that's only right and proper. Now, what's really good about this car is that you get considerably more boot space than you do in the 5 Series Saloon. 5 Series Saloon tops out at 490 litres. This, with the rear seats up, has 570 litres. And actually, what's really impressive is that this is the electric version, and this is the one we're driving home in. But there will, later in the summer, be 530e plug-in hybrid versions of this car. And that keeps the same boot volume in spite of having to package both a fuel tank and a battery, and that gives it one leg up on the rival Mercedes E-Class estate, which in plug-in hybrid form as an E300e you lose a considerable amount of boot space. Now, not only do you have all this space up here, you've also got some handy storage down here for cables, for the luggage net, and also for the luggage blind when you don't need to use that. It's quite easy to fold down the seats. You just pull the handles here and here, and now you've got 1,700 litres of space to play with. IKEA is not going to know what hit it. A powered tailgate is standard, not surprisingly, at this kind of price level. And let's face it, this is a car that you can pretty easily spec up to a 6-figure price tag in Ireland. However, there is one major, well, I say major, for me it's a major issue, for you it probably isn't. You'll notice that, unlike previous 5 Series Tourings, you can't open the rear glass. That always used to be such a handy feature of the old 5 Series Tourings. You could just flip up the glass, put in something small and light, and flip it back down again without having to open the whole section of the boot lid. There are valid reasons for this, mostly due to aerodynamics. If it had been a lifting glass, it would have had to have been a smaller window. You'd have had less good visibility. It wouldn't have been as good for aero. It would have impacted range. And also there would have been less loading space inside the car. For all of these disappointingly practical reasons, we have to do without. But we need to go and check out the interior before we set off on our epic drive. So let's go and do that. So here in the front of the i5 Touring, there aren't really an awful lot of differences between this and the Saloon version with which we're familiar. One of the things you can get in this car, which this version doesn't have, are vegan leather seats. I mean, vegan, it's plastic, basically, pretend leather. These ones have the real merino leather, which is actually a very nice option. You can also get a vegan leather wrapped steering wheel, which does actually look and feel still quite impressive. You've got the same curved screen set up here on top of the dashboard, driver's instruments here, and a big 14.5-inch screen here, which is your infotainment system. There are very, very few physical buttons, really just the start, stop, the gear shift, and of course the rotary controller for the iDrive system, which we're all very familiar with. There is thankfully a proper physical volume button for the stereo, which does at least help. All of the climate functions are on the screen, and you do have to go to a separate menu to get at them, and that is a bit annoying. We're not keen on that. But we do like the rest of it. Personally, I think this looks fantastic in here. This light bar that runs across the dashboard that changes colour and reacts to things that you do and warnings that the car gives you. Bit gimmicky, slightly naff looking, but I actually still kind of like it. Seat comfort is exceptionally good. Overall quality is just phenomenally good, right down to the grills here on top of the Harman Kardon stereo. Even those, which are normally cheap plastic bits, those feel good to the touch. There's good space. Door bins are a little bit on the small side, but there is storage here under the armrest, 2 cup holders, and wireless charging points down here. So it's certainly near enough as practical up front as it is in the boot, but we do need to check out the back seats as well, of course. So we tend to think of BMWs as being very selfish driver's car, oriented around the person sitting in the front. But this one's really not. The wheelbase on this car is really, really long, 2,995 millimeters, near as damn it 3 meters. So there is actually plenty of space back here. I mean, I'm just over 6 foot. I've got that seat set for me, and I've got air in between my knees and the front seat, plenty of headroom. The overall height, size and width of this Touring is exactly the same as the saloon, so there's not actually any extra headroom, but it feels like there is, because obviously the roof goes back further, you've got more glass, it just feels a little bit airier, although I wouldn't quite describe it as airy. Nonetheless, it's much, much roomier and more welcoming than the rival Mercedes EQE electric car, which of course doesn't have an estate version at all. So your feet do sit up a little bit high because of the battery under the floor. It's not too bad, not as bad as it is in some other electric cars. So the backs of your legs feel reasonably well supported. And you're very well set up back here. You've got smallish door bins back here, USB socket there, 2 more down there, rear air conditioning controls, and also, of course, a very nice armrest, although the cup holders are in a slightly awkward position, your elbow might end up going into them. But in terms of being a practical, useful family car, I don't think even tall children, teenage children like I've got, are going to complain too much about being back here. So we're starting our test drive in this, the M60 version. Now this is the range topper for the i5 and the i5 Touring lineup. This is the one with 2 electric motors, 601 horsepower and more than 800 Newton meters of torque. If you pull the little boost lever here behind the steering wheel, this thing will scamper to 100 kilometers an hour in just 3.8 seconds. Honestly, it feels like being drop kicked by a professional rugby player when you hit the loud pedal in this at full go. Actually, we're not long off the Autobahn, the A9 that runs out of Munich, and I mean the rate at which this thing gets from sort of normal cruising speeds up to 180, 190, even 200 kilometers an hour really takes some believing. It is an astonishingly rapid car. Actually, in dynamic mode and with that boost function activated, it verges on the uncomfortable when you accelerate very hard in this. It really throws you back in your seat. It does funny things to your stomach and to your cerebral cortex and your inner ear and everything else. Actually, if you just leave this in efficient mode, it's absolutely 100% as fast as you could possibly want a road-going car to be. I mean, you would need a proper racing car to actually beat this thing off the line. It is staggeringly quick. I think I've made that point now, have I? But the thing is, it's also a terrific all-rounder, this car, and not just because this is the more practical Touring version, the estate version, with that lovely big boot and that roomy back seat. Actually, the back seat space is about the same as you get in the saloon because the wheelbase is the same. It's just because the roofline extends back a bit further, it feels subjectively a bit airier and a bit more roomy. But what's great about this car is that, again, when you do put it into efficient mode and you do just kind of cruise along nice and gently like I'm doing now, it does that so well. It's so refined. Even on these 21-inch alloy wheels, it is really, really comfortable. It is it's so good at riding over bumps. I mean, yes, these roads around Bavaria that we're driving on now, these are very good roads. These are very well surfaced. But there are still a few bumps and lumps to be found. And when you do find them, the i5 M60 is completely unperturbed. Now, what it's possibly not is quite as responsive and as agile to drive as you might be hoping. I mean, this is knocking on for 2.3 tons at the curb in weight. It is a very, very heavy car, and on fast sweeping corners you don't really notice that. You've got lovely, beautifully weighted steering, and it's super accurate, so you don't really notice it there. Where you do notice it is what I'm going to do now, which is going around a relatively small roundabout, and there you can just feel the weight on the nose. You can feel the understeer build up a little bit. Now, you can play tunes with the 2 electric motors and the brakes and the regenerative braking to kind of balance that out and to try and get the nose to tuck in a bit better. But ultimately, you know, in slower, tighter corners, this feels its weight and its size. And don't forget, this is a 5-meter long car. Again, same length overall as the 4-door saloon. That hasn't changed, but it is a very big and really quite hefty car. So I think the thing is that M badge, even though it's an M performance badge, not a full M car badge, it does set up a level of expectation that, you know, you want it to be pin sharp and super agile and super fun to drive, and it isn't. What it is really, really good. I mean, it is phenomenally good to drive. But again, it's that perception of what you think it's going to be versus what it is. And really what it is it's more of an all-round performance car. Because it does that comfortable thing so well, because it does this low-speed running so well, it is a terrific all-rounder in that respect. And because it's an estate as well, this touring version, it's a bit of a queue car, because you just don't expect it to be blisteringly fast in a straight line, and indeed around corners too when you want it to be. In terms of efficiency and range, it's actually better than you expect. I mean, BMW claims a maximum range of 506 kilometers for this M60 version. I'm seeing around about 420 kilometers in real world in mixed conditions. Again, that includes a bit of a sprint on the Autobahn at very high speeds, and this more kind of slightly gentler country road driving with going slow through villages and towns, and then kind of up to about 100 kilometers per hour on the open stretches. So it's a pretty good mix of roads and types of driving. Plenty of opportunities for brake energy regeneration, obviously, which does help. And so far, we've averaged 21.6 kilowatt hours per 100 kilometers, which for a fast thing like this on big wheels and sporty tires, that's actually pretty good going, really. And when you combine that with the practicality, and again, if you didn't go for this gorgeous red paintwork, it would be such a subtle machine. Really, the only thing that tells you it's the high performance version is that blanked off grille at the front that always kind of reminds me of 1970s Aston Martin Vantages with that blanked off look. It's a very, very subtle thing, and I think most people just aren't going to tell what it is. You could even debadge it, of course. You could take the M60 badges off the back if you wanted to, and then you would have an incredibly stealthy high performance car. Having said all that, I reckon that it's actually the eDrive 40 with its mere, in inverted commas, 340 horsepower that's actually going to be the better of the two to drive. So let's go and get one of those, take it for a spin, and see what that's like. Well, we've got some kilometres under the wheels of this i5 Touring eDrive 40, and it's proving to be a very, very good machine indeed. Now, so far, I'm bearing in mind I've only scratched the surface of this journey that I'm making so far. We've only done 160 kilometres thus far, but so far it's not showing any massive advantage in range compared to the much more powerful M60 that we drove this morning. Still getting around about 420 to 450 kilometres from a full battery charge, in theory anyway. I'm not running this battery down completely flat as I'm driving. I'm not running that risk. I'm on my way now. I'm somewhere near Augsburg at the moment, heading for the French border and on to my overnight halt near Strasbourg. I'm going to charge again before I get there. I could possibly just about do it without stopping, but again, it's taking a risk I don't want to take. So we'll have a quick top up in about another 120 kilometers or so, and see how we get on. But what this car does incredibly well is make big distances feel short. It's so comfortable and so refined, so easy to drive. I wish it had more range, actually. I wish it had more, because it's such a great car to knock off a big distance, just like I'm doing today and tomorrow. Net of concerns about charging and making sure that we can get where we're going on sufficient charge. But it is lovely. It's just so refined and so quiet in here as well, and great seats and a very good stereo. This one's got a Harman Kardon system. So all in all, really, really well-rounded performance. I think we won't be able to judge the charging fully till we actually get it back to Dublin and see how it's done over the course of this long haul. But one thing I can say is that the vaunted highway assist, which in theory, in certain markets, and specifically those markets at the moment are Germany, the US and Canada, in theory it allows you to, it's sort of a level 2.5 of semi-automated driving, of driver assistance. It in theory allows you to take your hands completely off the steering wheel, and as long as you keep your eyes on the road, the system will happily steer and drive the car along for you, and even offer up the potential for lane changes when it needs to. And all you do then is you just glance at the appropriate mirror, whether you want to go left or go right in the lane. It doesn't actually work very well though. For a start, if you're wearing these, if you're wearing polarized sunglasses, the infrared scanner that keeps an eye on your face and on your eyes specifically can't see you very well, and so the system tends to go, well, can't see you, get your hands back on the wheel, I'm not doing it for you, because it looks like you're not paying attention. What's worse is, though, if you take your sunglasses off and it can see your eyes, it's hypersensitive to you turning your head. I mean, just a simple turn of the head to look at something further up the road or out the side window, or just to check your mirrors, as you should be doing, even if the car is on automated, semi-automated control, you should be keeping an eye on your mirrors. You should be situationally aware of what's going on around the car and what the car is doing. It throws an absolute fit. It just suddenly goes, no, you've moved your head, you're not paying attention, get your hands back on the wheel, I'm not doing it. And it's so annoying. So I've just actually turned it off, and I'm just driving with regular cruise control now, and I'm controlling the brake and throttle myself, which, just to be honest, it works a lot better. Some of these automated systems, even the very advanced ones like this, they're actually an awful lot more trouble than they're worth. They don't actually make life any easier or better for you most of the time. Sometimes they can be helpful. I mean, trickling in slow traffic, as we were a little while back, there were some roadworks that slowed up the traffic for a bit. That's quite handy, obviously. It takes a little bit of the strain out of you doing that, but for the most part, I would just leave it off and do the driving yourself, because it's just easier and you're more aware of what's happening anyway, so it's probably actually safer. So onwards to Strasbourg and the overnight stop, and as I say, probably a quick top up of electrons between now and then. A bit more of an update then, I guess. Well, we've arrived. We've arrived at our overnight stop in the little town of Saverne, not far from Strasbourg. And I didn't stop and charge on the way. I now slightly regret that. I possibly should have done. I thought I was going to get here with about 100 kilometres left in the battery. I've actually arrived with 49, having covered 381 kilometres since my last charge. So again, it's hovering at around that kind of 420, 430 kilometre usable range on one charge, which is not fantastic. Although it has to be said, we've been cruising at about 130 kilometres an hour for a lot of the time, because obviously we've been on Autobahn and then on French auto routes. So that does obviously, drive the consumption up a bit compared to what we'd get at home. So it would probably go a bit further at home. But we're here, get some sleep, back on the road early and head for Cherbourg. So, very quick update. We're still about 250-ish kilometres short of Paris. Stopped for another quick charge. It seems to be a little bit thirstier today for its battery charge, so I'm trying to do this in sort of 200 to 250 kilometre lunges with rapid charging in between. I'm on an Ionity charger at the moment. Still seem to be okay though. Should be in plenty of time for the ferry. It's all working fine for the moment. Let's see how we go. So another quick charging stop, back on a Total Energies charger at this point. These are really good, these 300 kilowatt chargers, by the way. They're very good. If you're using them, handy tip, if you're using a credit card rather than an RFID card, you don't tag on at the station itself. You go over here to this little thing, and that's where you pay. I'm using a BMW charging card, so I just tap on the front of the machine here itself. But it's going quite well, this sort of doing short lunges and quick charge ups. It's working all right. We're not far from Paris now. I think probably 2 more of these stops will get me to Cherbourg with enough charge left in the car. I have to be slightly careful because the ferry that I'm using tonight does not have an onboard charger, so I need to make sure I arrive at the port with enough charge left to do the drive on the other side when I get back to Ireland. But going well so far. Car is fantastic. A little bit shorter in range than I'd ultimately like. An extra, say, 50 to 100 kilometers out of the battery would be nice, but other than that, it's a terrific car. Well, I think I can pretty safely say we're going to make it to the ferry. Last charging stop now at Ionity, just outside the famous town of Caen in Normandy, just to make sure I've got enough, as I said earlier, enough left in the battery for the bit of driving I've got to do once I get to the other side, because there's no charging on the ferry. It's been brilliant, this car. Again, I would say, I mean, okay, its motorway range is not fantastic. But it will do, on a full charge, it'll do about 400 kilometers on the motorway, and in more general driving it'll do about 500 kilometers, which is good. It's fine, it's not bad. It could be better though. I mean, when you consider that the likes of the Volkswagen ID.7 will do 500 kilometers even if you are on the motorway all day, so will the Mercedes-Benz EQE. So this does seem a little bit underfed in terms of range, which is a pity because everything else about it is really lovely. It's so smooth and refined. It does drive extremely well. Now, that said, it is quite a big and bulky car. It's 5 meters long, and you can feel the kind of width and the weight of the nose. Maybe slightly less so here in this eDrive 40 version than in the twin motor, I should say, M60 model. But nonetheless, not a car you're ever unaware of its size. But I think it makes up for that in terms of its cabin ambience, its comfort, its quality, and above all, its practicality. I mean, if you're going to have a car to cross Europe in, this is a pretty good bet. Although, I mean, it has to be said, it would have been slightly easier and simpler with a 520i petrol. I wouldn't have had to have stopped so much, and I probably would have been at Cherbourg by now. But then again, I'd have been too early for my ferry if I'd gotten there now. So, all's fair in love and war, I suppose. But yeah, I mean, I'm always a sucker for estate cars, and I'm particularly a sucker for 5 Series estates. Always have been, and well, this just doesn't change any of that. And we're here. So that's 1,271 kilometers since about 3 o'clock yesterday afternoon. It's now just coming up to 5:30. So that includes a 10-hour stop for sleep. And stop to charge, I think, about 5 times in the end. Would have done it with 4 charges if the charger at the hotel had worked last night, but it didn't. So we've averaged just over 20 kilowatt hours per 100 kilometers, which is okay. Again, I just feel like a bit more range wouldn't go amiss in this car. If it could just reach 500 kilometers of range on one charge reliably, that would be great. As it is, you'll get somewhere between 400 and 450, depending on how and where you're driving it. That does feel like not quite enough. But in every other respect, this is a terrific car. Absolutely lovely. So glad I brought one home. So just one quick wrap up piece before we finish, and thank you all who've watched this for coming on this slightly nuts pan-European journey with me by electric car. We're back in Ireland now. I'm not long off the ferry in Rosslare. I've just done a very quick top up at the Ionity station in Gorey, and be in Dublin in about 40 minutes or so to drop this car off with BMW. I know I've been talking about the range on this car, and yes, I would definitely like to have an extra 50 clicks of usable day-to-day range out of it, I think. But as an overall machine, it is just so wildly impressive. I mean, it's just, it ticks every single box that personally I have for a car. And I do like the way it looks. I know a lot of you won't. I do like the way it looks. I think this is a very handsome car. I mean, particularly that M60 that we were driving in the red paint. That's a fantastic looking machine. But even this one in the pale grey, I think looks really, really tasty. And I just love the fact that it's an estate. It's not an SUV. It's still really useful. It's still really comfy. I can get my kids in it. I can get my dog in it. I can get luggage in it. I can get shopping in it. I can do all that stuff. That's what I really love about it. And this interior is just fabulous. BMW has moved ahead of Mercedes and Audi now in terms of cabin design. I think that's just locked and sealed now. This is better. So yeah, this i5 Touring, this is a cracking car. I guess watch how you charge it. Plan your longer journeys quite carefully to make sure that you can get the charge you need en route. And yeah, I'd have one in a heartbeat, frankly. So don't forget, head back on over to CompleteCar.ie. You can read all about this car as well, and every other new BMW that's on sale, and every other new electric car that's on sale. And don't forget to check out our YouTube channel. Do please like and subscribe. And again, thanks for driving with me across Germany and France.